Hello everyone, Mr. Voiles here with another great tutorial for you. Today guys, I'm so excited because I'm going to be teaching you pretty much my favorite of all topics in photography, and that's black and white. So black and white, I'm just a sucker for it. I always loved black and white photography, and today we're going to learn how to do that in Lightroom. So what you want to do is scroll down, and what we're going to be working with is this little sticky note here. This is my black and white workflow. So these are basically all of the sliders that I will use inside of Lightroom as I'm working doing black and white. At the bottom here, I put that these 6 steps pretty much go in a circle, which means once you go through all of them, you might go through all of them again or go back and forth from one to the other just to kind of balance. They have to kind of balance out with each other. So let's go ahead. I'm going to actually shrink the web page here down over here to the side where I can see it. And we've got Lightroom opened up here. And this is actually a photograph that I downloaded from Serge Remeli, his website. If you go to the website there, you'll see that he gives free downloads of his raw files for you to work with. And that's actually linked on the video of today. So just let me know if you want that and I will show you how to find it. So let's go back. We're going to look at going to keep our sticky note here on the side. And this is the picture we're working with. And as you can see, it's pretty flat and dull. You can still see some color, but it is a raw file. So we have to put the work into it to make it look good. So basically, what we're going to do is be working today all in the basic panel. And so with the basic panel, basically what I would start out with is my exposure slider. So you can see the picture's pretty dark, so I'm going to bring up the exposure. And right off the bat, when you're basically bringing up the exposure, which is your first step, you're going to realize you're having this kind of a battle, because if you go too far with the brightness on the exposure, you start to lose detail in the sky. However, if you don't go far enough, then you can't really see into those shadow areas. So it's kind of a balancing act. We'll probably end up coming back to the exposure slider here in just a second to make for sure everything is balanced. But you know, I'm kind of looking at the middle tones of the buildings and everything, and I'm gonna just put it right there. So it looks like a pretty good place to start. Like I've said, with these sliders, you know, sometimes less is more. Okay, now I'm going to skip contrast for now. That's the next slider, but for now, I'm just going to skip it, and you're going to see why here in just a minute. Let's go ahead and go to our highlights and shadows. If you look at my checklist here, number 2 is highlights and shadows, and that's because they kind of go together. So highlights is basically going to affect anything that's bright, which in this case would be our sky, all the clouds at the top. And then shadows is going to affect any of these shadow places, like kind of underneath these arches. So let's bring down the highlights because I want to see those clouds. You can see how the clouds just kind of, you can see them better when you bring the highlights down. And then we're going to bring our shadows up. And as you can see, some of those bricks in those arches right there, you start to see them a little bit better. I don't want to go all the way. You know, I still want there to be a nice contrast between dark parts of the image and bright parts of the image. So I would say somewhere kind of in the middle is where I'm going to leave that. So I brought the highlights all the way down, -100. But I'm just going to leave the shadows about +47. Guys, for each picture, it's going to be different, so you're having to kind of use your judgment. Next on the list, we're going to go to whites and blacks. So just like shadows and highlights go together, whites and blacks kind of complement each other too. Your whites are basically anything in the picture, any pixels that are literally completely 100% white. And basically what they can do is kind of bring back some brightness. And then your blacks, you're going to bring down, and those can bring back some of the darkness. If you really want to see any pixels that are truly white or black, whenever you're messing with the whites or blacks sliders, just hold down Option on the keypad. And when you click and drag, you will see Lightroom will start to reveal those pixels. Okay, so in the sky, I can see those are my pixels that are truly becoming 100% white. So if I let go of that option, you can see even though the sky looks like it's all white, it's really just those pixels in the middle that is 100% white. And I really don't like how bright that made the sky, so that's why I'm going to leave my whites, maybe at positive 13 or 14, somewhere in there, positive 19, 20. Same thing with the blacks. You can hold down Option. There's nothing wrong with having pure blacks and pure whites in your photograph, but most of the time we're just going to have, a little bit. We don't want, to override every single pixel being completely black or white, because that kind of takes away from the middle ground as well. Okay, so far is looking pretty good. I think I'm going to come back to the exposure and brighten up the image just a tad more. Okay? Now, here's my favorite part, is this is where you're going to make the picture black and white. We can come to vibrance and saturation, okay, and just bring those all the way down, -100 on both. Okay, so see, now we've got a really cool black and white picture, and all of these things that we've been doing with the shadows and the highlights, you can see how they make a big difference now, okay? So after you get rid of the vibrance and the saturation, you may want to go through and mess with some of your sliders again, just barely tweaking them. Now, this is the part where I bring in what I call the secret sauce. The secret sauce is going to be clarity and texture. Texture is going to bring out any of the details. So if I zoom in here, you can see these street lights and windows. If I bring up the texture, you can see all that gets way sharper. Look at what that did. Now, texture will also bring out graininess, but with black and white photography, honestly, graininess looks pretty cool sometimes. It makes it look like film, which is kind of neat. Okay, now the clarity is really the secret sauce, because when you bring up your clarity, notice the difference. You don't want to go too far, because that will look kind of grungy, and we want to stay, in a nice, elegant feel. And so I'm just going to bring my clarity to about 20, maybe no more than 30 or 40, okay? So notice the difference of before and after. Before, after. That clarity brings in contrast, okay? That is why at the beginning I skipped contrast, is because you're going to notice between the clarity slider and the contrast slider is also going to be a balancing act. So if I bring up contrast, look at how much it starts to look really muddy, and all of the tones start to look really like grungy and nasty looking. So you don't want to go too far. What I could do is take away clarity and bring up the contrast. Okay, so it's kind of, once again, it's your judgment. Okay, so I feel like I'm losing a lot of the shadows in these archways, and I want to see some of those bricks in there. So I'm going to bring up the shadows again, and that is looking pretty good. So see, now that I've gone through this whole process, I realize that I do want to bring shadows up almost, if not all of the way. So now I can see some of those bricks under those archways, okay? And but it is kind of taking away shadows from the top of these roofs. So I think I'm going to leave that for now, okay? And then in the sky, I still want to see more clouds, so I'm going to bring the exposure down just a tad and bring the contrast up maybe like plus just 2 or 3 points. Okay, so that's why I say these go in a circle, because you are basically balancing all of them together. Alrighty guys, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining me on this. If you think we've done a lot now, just wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow is really where some of the magical stuff that I'm going to show you will come in. Alright, so we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.